Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 35 of Deep in the Novo. I'm Ryan Novozinsky, joined here, as always, by my co-host, Sudeep Tumma. And today, we're going to be talking about another OSU basketball loss, to a team in the state of Texas. 77-74, OSU lost to the Texas Longhorns before a long, what seems like a forever long break for this team. Deep, I believe it's 2 weeks, and they're going to have to be thinking about a lot of things over these next couple weeks, aren't they?
Yeah, for sure. It's a tough one because you see the rest of the Big 12 in general, but you see the next couple opponents, and it's difficult. It really is. But it's a tough loss to swallow. But it's one of those you knew that could have possibly been coming. That's why it just makes that TCU loss so much harder because that was a game they had in the bag. They could have won, should have won, would have won,
Yeah.
and then now you go into the stretch.
And honestly, I mean, you look around Texas too. You have good players in this team. There's a
Sure.
reason you're number 11 in the country, obviously. But man, this is probably one of the strongest Texas teams we've seen in recent memory, I'd say.
Yeah, I think so.
The
I
strong.
could agree with that because across the board, right? Because you forget the fact that Greg Brown is there. You
Mhm.
already have Matt Coleman, Courtney Ramey, Jericho Sims. You not only just good players, polished players, experienced players, and this is a good team that Shaka Smart's put together. It's not just Mo Bamba and a bunch of other
No,
guys, right? You got a bunch of more. You got a very good team, I think so.
it's a good identity too, because I like
Right?
the way they play basketball.
Yeah. You talk about the defense first off.
Yeah, let's talk. Let's start there. We'll start with the
Right.
defense, and how Texas rather was able to fare against Cade Cunningham. Because Cade, had a lot of points there, but when it comes down to it, obviously the win probably goes into this. But it looks like Greg Brown outperformed him a little bit, and that's not a knock on Cade per se, but man, this guy's just spectacular, and the way this Texas defense was able to roll out there, I mean, you saw it and how they were able to operate. They apply pressure to this OSU team and shut things down.
I think that was a key. You start with Cade, right? Like you mentioned, that's really where the whole obviously in any game, it all starts with Cade with this Oklahoma State team, and you're gonna have contribution from other guys. Sometimes can be more or less, but it always starts with Cade and how they're defending him, which is like one we try to hit on every single podcast, right?
Yeah.
Because we need to, because that's really the identity of this team. On offense, of course. And you saw it was two things. One, Texas obviously committed to Cade, but I don't think they really committed as hard as TCU did or other
Mhm.
teams have really just clamped in on him. But it was Courtney Ramey. He did an excellent job getting in his face, sticking one on one with with his lateral quickness, his ability to stick in Cade and pressure him constantly. From half court, it felt like he was just up on him, and Cade got. Obviously Cade is so talented. He's going to get to the rim sometimes. He's going to make plays. He's going to get around it. But that really just stuck it, and that's what really how. I mean, yeah, you talk about 25 points for Cade, or I think that was 25 points. But
Yeah,
like Mike Boyden always says, stats aren't always reflective of the best player.
of course.
And this is one of those games you see 25 points, but a lot of it was late, a lot of it was garbage time, a lot of it was kind of wishy-washy in different outlets. It's like I look at the end of the night and say, wait, 25 points? That doesn't feel right.
It
I
doesn't.
felt like it felt like it was like between maybe 15 points, but an inefficient 15 points. That's what it felt like. And yeah, I mean, it was like that, and you start from there, and it streaks the whole offense because you see the way they're doubling, you see the way they're shrinking the court. This is what I kept saying last game after TCU. If they can't start hitting threes, if OSU can't start hitting threes, then it's going to make it difficult down the stretch because every time Cade drives in, every time Cade posts up, every time you have guys, driving to the rim, driving in and attacking the rim. While yes, that's what your primary wants to be. If you don't have those shooters, those guys who are going to spread the floor, and that's what we keep saying, right? OSU has those shooters, but if they're not knocking down those threes, then teams are just going to keep shrinking down the floor. But what the difference with Texas is, everyone can try to implement that game plan. But I think Texas has a personnel, the coaching, the system on defense to really make it work because you see how well they move their rotations. It's smooth, it's clean. They're so active. They play such good defense. Then they have those rim protectors, right? You see Greg Brown coming up the slot, Jericho
Yeah.
Sims. This is like you don't need Mo Bamba. You have Jericho Sims, who's got that same mold, right? Of a Jackson Hayes, of a Mo Bamba. Then you see the guys and how well they rotate, and it's like there's times where there's doubling guys, and yeah, there's an outlet all the way across the court, but those cross court passes take time. They're not always accurate,
Mhm.
and yeah, you might get the ball there, but it's maybe it's just a little bit lower, and then fair and play has to duck down a little bit. By the time he gets back up, there's already a defender in front of him, and even if it is accurate, by the time the ball travels there, the man can get there, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, ball travels faster than man, but also the man is not as far and he can rotate back. And they just covered everything up, made life really difficult. And their defense was really impressive. That was a big factor for sure.
Here's a perfect example of this, right? Courtney Ramey.
Right.
So he goes over 6 from the field, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't score a single point.
But I didn't even like it didn't matter.
And obviously fouls are one thing, but
Sure.
and you know that proved to be the downfall for him. But my goodness, the production that he has on defense, that's all you need from him, right?
And I didn't even realize that he had gone over 6 until, the commentator said that, because
exactly.
you just talk about his defensive impact, and that was just worth so much more than whatever points he scored or couldn't or did not score.
Yeah. And there's no really way to quantify that, right? Because I mean, you look at his defensive stats too. There's no blocks, there's one steal. And other than that, like but that doesn't matter, because the way he was able to apply pressure to Cade really shut him down. And you're right, because when you look at the 25 points for Cade, you say that and you're like, oh wow, this statistically is probably one of his best games.
Sure.
But I honestly, that 10-point game seemed a lot more clutch.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, I have to agree with that, because like numbers are deceiving. That's why numbers don't lie. Yeah, they do. I mean, numbers could genuinely be so deceiving, because it doesn't tell the whole story. And you talk about garbage time points, you talk about easy points, you talk about the type of way you get points. Sometimes, like, I see Avery Anderson, and I might even not say that Avery Anderson had a better game than Cade, but his impact was crazy, because I keep saying you keep seeing miss after miss, but if you really break it down and watch it, Avery Anderson is breaking down against the Texas defense that's been clamping down. He gets them to soak in. So even though he misses the layup, it happened 2 or 3 times where as soon as he misses, Caleb Boone comes in, rebounds, and puts it up. The only reason that rebounding lane is there for Caleb Boone is because Avery Anderson was able to break down the defense. That's impact plays. Those are impact players.
Right. And you saw this too in a big run that Texas had in the second half, right? You saw Texas and the way they were able to dominate, 17-0 run for them at one point, right?
Right.
City, from your perspective, how was this able to happen? Because this is a quick Texas offense, in addition to their defensive identity and really just whole lot of threes too.
That was a big key to threes, like on point to threes, right? Because you talk about that run, and you saw in the first half, it was 30 something, very close. OSU looked like they played that better half, because in spite of the defensive coverage on Cade, in spite of all of that, you had role players stepping up. And these guys aren't just role players. I mean, they're guys who can self-sustain points, right? Avery Anderson, Bryce Williams, Isaac Likely. I mean, Isaac Likely is so efficient, game in, game out. And those guys are able to, when you get those one-on-one opportunities, because there's so much commitment on Cade, you can't double everyone every single play, right? Because if you want to double Cade the way that you're doubling him, you're going to leave those other guys exposed to one-on-one matchups. And in general, you can defend that. But it's difficult because these guys are talented, right? It's like I keep saying, this isn't Trae Young in Oklahoma. You have talented guys who can create their own shot. And those guys are able to do that. And then on defense, OSU did a good job, doubling and putting some ball pressure. But Texas is also missing a lot of threes. Now, if you look at the numbers before this game, Texas didn't have the greatest of three-point percentage. But you look at some of these shooters, and especially from what you see last year, from Matt Coleman to Courtney Ramey, even Greg Brown, it's a little bit, he's more of a guy who can attack the rim than he is a three-point shooter. But all those guys, once they started hitting some threes in the second half, and they were stroking them, I mean, they were taking them aggressively and confidently, because that's why the first half I kept watching, and, the way OSU was kind of exposing there were some threes that were uncontested, but Texas was taking them and missing them, but they were still uncontested. They're still good shots. But again, a good shot depends on how good of a three-point shooter you have. But I think Texas has some good three-point shooters. And you keep giving those uncontested shots, eventually they're going to go in. Then once these guys get in a rhythm, they get in a flow, they're able to just take everything. They'll pull up, 5 feet behind the three-point line. They'll pull up things contested. And three-pointer, like I keep saying, I always say, everyone says, the three-pointer is the ultimate equalizer. And when you can hit that, it just makes it difficult, because OSU wasn't, I mean, I guess they can kind of say they were struggling on offense, but they were, they were putting it together. But then you start hitting those threes and everything just goes haywire, because the way you were playing defense and hoping that your defense would win the game while you do enough on offense, suddenly the offense just, the defense just, gets exposed and gets blown up, and your offense just can't keep pace. And yeah, I mean, the three-pointers were the biggest thing for me, because you talk about one after another, and, it just kept hitting time and time again. And it was big for Texas.
It was huge for Texas. I mean, and like you said, time and time again, it looked like it was happening, and it was paced out well too for this team, in terms of the way they were attacking from beyond the arc too. So what a performance from them. You got to give it to them at least. And when you look at, sort of the opposite side of this, when you look at how OSU was able to defend against them, this is the second game in a row where it seems like 3-pointers seemingly were a problem for the OSU defense. What is your thoughts on that? Because that's a lot of people, it's kind of being a concerning thing for them right now.
Yeah, I keep going back and forth with this because sometimes it just looks like I said, I think after TCU or somewhere
Yeah.
along the way, it was like, yeah, you're gonna give up some of those looks because of and you again, let's just step back. Look at the whole body of work. Oakland, Oral Roberts, uh, excuse me, you TCU. You
Yeah.
think about some of these 3-point shooting teams. These guys can hit threes. They were stroking them from long range and in transition times where it's just undefendable. Because if you're playing zone defense and suddenly someone just pull up 10 feet behind the 3-point line, 5 feet behind the 3-point line, sometimes those are going to be a little like you just can't go out and stretch out your defense that far.
Mm-hmm.
And the other, like it's like this is always just the cliche almost is zone defense, but it's also true. You can't shoot your way out of a zone, but you also need to be able to shoot to defeat a zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's in a ridiculous way. It's kind of like that. So it's like when you see those like crazy 3-point shooting teams, you just don't play a zone against them because it's just you can't defend every three. But it's one of those things. It's like you want to keep ball trapping and um, pressuring the defense, and that's the way OSU wants to play, right? With their guards, with their talent on defense, they want to ball pressure. They want to. You see so many traps in the high pick and roll, and every pick it's just about hedged or trapped. When you're driving in, you see guys doubling, tripling all the time, and sometimes it's weird things where you don't have weak side help, or sometimes and then down low, and then it comes late, and then suddenly it's a 3-point shooter, or the rotation is not there strong enough, or communication is not as fluid sometimes, and it's a little bit inconsistent because that first double is there, that first trap is there. But I'm not looking there. I'm looking at the second, third pass,
Yeah.
potentially even, because if you don't have those other rotations going toward that, then it just changes the whole complexion because then you start leaving guys open. And I'm starting to wonder if like they're just not moving well enough or what the deal is there because sometimes I feel like okay, you just are just coming late contest because you're doing that and that's okay sometimes, but other times it's just kind of like okay, you're just not moving well enough. And I wonder because you're doing better in the paint and you have the personnel to play defense and it has its benefits, right? Regardless of whether you're leaving those 3-pointers or not, because you're pushing guy, you're getting the offense at a sink. You saw a bunch of turnovers get caused against Texas, and OSU's even doing a better job with their turnovers. But I wonder, if it's just a thing of not being active enough and see if Mike Boynton wants to, get them to that point where they're seeing those things, right? See that you're not moving on the third rotation, not just that double, but the one after that when the ball goes out. Because that can be even more important because out of those traps, out of those doubles, a lot of times it's easy to make a quick pass and then a pass to somewhere else if that team is smart on offense. But that's what I'm kind of wondering, okay, how are those going to go? Because you see some of that and you wonder.
Yeah,
It's an interesting thing, but that's why it's like I go back and forth sometimes.
there's little nuances that make this that make these performances what they are, right?
Right.
And you're right. It makes another area strong, but it also can leave one area more vulnerable.
And I don't think it needs to be that way. That's
I
my main
agree.
thing, right? Where it's like you watch Baylor and you see, or Syracuse even, and I mean Baylor's the best example because they have the same makeup, right? 4 guards and then a center who's more versatile. And when you see that trap, that double, and then from there, there's nothing exposed, right? There's no open 3-pointer for you to just easily pass to because they're seamlessly rotating. So I just don't think that needs to be a thing. I think with coaching and more coaching and more practice and understanding, those things can be cleaned up.
Exactly, when you look at this, the way Baylor, you're right. That's almost the perfect form of this OSU makeup, right? On defense
Right.
and what they were able to do last season and going into this season too. So when Mike Boynton's looking to scheme up his things, obviously everybody wants to mimic what Scott Drew's doing down there in Baylor.
Right.
They're killing teams right now, but it's a tough task. But
Oh, no doubt. Yeah.
team, I just don't. What is happening? Seriously, what's
And a
happening?
lot of that's what I'm saying. It's really a balance of just like, okay, you're playing really good 3-point teams and they're pulling up in certain spots. And also, I mean, you're giving them looks sometimes, and that's a difficult balance, honestly.
Yeah. And you know what? Here's the deal too, and we'll go to offense now because
Sure.
when you look at this offense, it's even more frustrating because they had the lineup switch, right? And that was good. I think that provided obviously a pretty decent spark. I think Avery Anderson
Right.
played really well. I think
On both sides of the ball. Yep.
yeah, exactly. I think Moncrief played well too. But
Yep.
you know, this offense really is it's just fallen flat, right? And
Yeah.
it's not the same offense that the expectations wise going into it, we thought it could be.
And a lot of it comes down to shooting because you look at some of the looks because it really was like a tale of two halves almost.
It
Because
was.
in the first half, I kept seeing when Cade was being doubled, and you have these other guys, they were doing such a good job. And I talked about TCU, you got to the right spots, but whether it was the fact that Kevin Samuel and a 7 foot presence was altering shots or what it was, but they were just flat out missing layups. They were
Yeah.
not executing after getting to the right spots. In this game, you saw it where Bryce Williams, Isaac Likely, Avery Anderson, they were getting to the spots, they were making baskets. They were
Mhm.
taking shots and they were making baskets, right? Guys were getting to the right places. Matthew Alexander Moncrief making some baskets down low. You saw these right looks and they were going in. If things were going fluid, things were going very fluid. But second half, things really fell apart because Texas able to shrink the floor. They were able to commit inside because they were just not scared. A 3-point ball wasn't going in. Things were difficult there, and that was a big thing. 100%. Like that's what I really believe. And that's what I'm saying. It really was like a tale of two halves. And the second half, when you're not able to get that 3-point shooting, then suddenly teams realize, okay, yeah, we don't need to, spread out because you can't make it anyway. And
Mhm.
that's really where when you talk about all these guys, you have so much talent. Guys, what I said, you can create your own shot. Isaac Likely, Avery Anderson, all these guys, they can make their own shot, but without shooting, everything falls apart for any team ever.
What'd you think of how Bryce Williams fit into this the other day? Because he's obviously one of the biggest, I guess, bright spots of the season so far. And
Sure.
let's just say this, folks: this season's not over. It's 6-2,
Oh,
right?
100%.
It,
Yeah.
it seems a little bit, odd because, and this is a tough Big 12 too, sure. But man, this season's not over. But rightfully so. You got to give credit to Bryce Williams, who's been one of the bright spots this season, and just keeps providing a spark. And in this Texas
Yeah.
game, he provided a spark late on in the game. So what did you see from him, both defensively and offensively?
Yeah, I mean, defensively, you keep seeing the same thing. He just sticks so well on
Yeah.
defense. His commitment to play defense, but also his athletic gifts. The
Mhm.
lateral quickness is off the charts. It's like we always say, right? It's like you can see into the future. He's a stud on defense. He really is becoming that six man, like that elite six man. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, I may even say like he can come out and be the best six man in the Big 12
Yeah.
at the end of the season. He's constantly putting up points. He's a presence. He's good because he can fit in well, where he can play off ball and he can play that shooting guard role. He can catch and shoot role. He can handle the ball. He can play point guard, or he can just play off come off screens a little bit, or doesn't do as much of that, but he can do that, right? He can come off the dribble drives and drive up, pull up in the mid range. You can drive to the rim. He is an athletic freak, 100%,
Yeah.
and he gives you a lot where he can pass too. He's a good passer and he can get to the rim and score, and that's a big thing to come off the bench and be able to have that, especially when Cade hits the bench. That's a big thing, and a guy who can really fit in. He's been impressive.
Through and through, Bryce Williams has been one of my favorite players to watch this year for all the reasons you mentioned, right?
Right.
Especially his defensive prowess, his defensive intelligence. It's a sight to see because you're right.
Yeah.
He can predict the future. He has incredible quickness, and my goodness, his shot making ability too. Like I
Sure.
think he's a great shooter. I think you said it best there too. He can
Yeah. Great shooter.
and he is an athletic freak. You were right about him.
Yeah, exactly. And you love the shooting because that's a big thing, right? You talk about a team that struggles with shooting. You can use all the shooting you get, and this guy's been a pretty consistent shooter for the most part. Obviously, there are some games, but
Sure.
he's a great addition for this team. And I
He,
just got to keep wondering what the hell went wrong in Ole Miss.
it had to be something completely egregious. Who knows? But man, you're
Yeah.
right. There had to be some sort of weird nonsense happening at Ole Miss with the Rebels down there. So when you look at this season going forward, you got a couple tough games coming up, right?
Right.
You got Texas Tech. You got after that, I believe another tough Big 12 opponent. Gosh, I'm honestly blanking right now.
I think it's
But
West Virginia. Yep.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have a tough schedule out for this team within the next couple of weeks. They have some time off. What would you say, and what would you evaluate the thing that they need to work on the most in these couple of weeks of practice?
I think the biggest thing is shooting, and
Me
that
too.
has to be the easy one, right? Where because that's where it collapses the whole offense, where it does. And it was the turnovers that were early on hampering, which I didn't think were a big deal because you look at how they happened, the offensive sets not coming together, and it wasn't as big a deal. And it hasn't been since game one, game two, a little bit. It hasn't been a talking point at all. The rebounding hasn't really been a talking point. Now after this game, there were some struggle with rebounding. You talk about how many offensive rebounds Texas got, and a
Yeah.
lot of them are just like it's like that where OSU doesn't have the size to be lazy. There are games for teams that have, normally big men or normally guys that can rebound, where they're going to slump off a little bit and not attack as hard, and they'll be okay because they have the big men and maybe they'll get a little yelled at a little bit, but it's not going to cost them a game. And
Yeah.
with this team, it's going to cost them games because yeah, they have the personnel, but those personnel have to box out. These guys are smaller. One of your best rebounders, if not your best rebounder, is Keelan Boone, right? Not even Caleb Boone.
Mhm.
And Cade and Isaac Likely and all these guys, and they have to be tough. They have to box out. They have to read their keys and get it and go. And if they keep doing that, it's easy. But sometimes it's like we talk about with football, gap control. You forget so often. So that's one thing where you're gonna. This is a reminder that hey, you gotta always rebound because if not, it can bite you a little bit.
Yeah.
And then, but biggest thing is gonna be shooting because this offense can really blow up. I do believe that as long as you have 3-point shooting, because not only does it give you more points, it will open up the whole offense, especially for Cade Cunningham. Open up the offense for Cade Cunningham.
Mhm.
But until that 3-point shooting gets solved, and I just don't think it's a thing of not having the 3-point shooters and go in the gym and practice and become better. They have the personnel. For whatever reason, it's not clicking right now. Guys are just missing. I don't know if it's confidence. I don't know what it is. I can't judge on that. But that is something that needs to improve 100%.
It's hard to evaluate right now as it stands, but do you think that if, let's say, these things go right, let's say these things get, I'd even say 45% better within the next couple of weeks, you think this is a tournament team?
Yeah, I think it can be because just considering where you don't need an amazing record in the Big 12, and that's just a testament to how good the Big 12 is. Of
Yeah.
course, not how bad they are, right? Because you look at all the talent of these teams. You got 5 teams in what the top 15, top 25, top 15, I think, right? And man, so much talent. I'm like I'm amazed how Texas Tech is like 15. I
Yeah.
think they are so much more talented than that. They
I
were
think so
lost by
too.
Kansas by a point. I said before the game, obviously I was joking, but before the Kansas Texas Tech game, if Texas Tech lost, I still think they should have been bumped up in rankings. They are really talented.
Yeah.
And you look down from that, every team, I think, with the exception of Iowa State and Kansas State, probably, well, Kansas State for sure, but Iowa State probably, you got so much talent, so much depth. You got a lot of scary teams in this conference, and even those teams, there's no night off in the Big 12,
No.
and it's even with not an amazing record, you could still see a team, maybe I don't know. I mean, as long as you go above 500 in the conference, which again is a tough task by itself, and even that maybe without you might be able to make it just because of how good this conference is. But I think this team it has a makeup to, and with the exciting factors of Cade, it's going to be hard to keep them out as long as their resume makes them deserve it.
I think so too, right? And we won't see this team, like I said before, for another couple of weeks. The next time, Sudeep, you and I are going to have a basketball episode is not till next year.
Man, what a crazy year.
Come on, man. This is the part where you're supposed to laugh. No, but that is, that's where it stands with OSU basketball right now. And this OSU team, they've got some things to pick up on defense. They got some things to pick up on in terms of shooting, and they've got some things to mesh together that they need to become a more cohesive team, and just have more cohesion with some of these, I guess, outlets, right? And
Right.
definitely some of these shooting opportunities and just open shots and everything like that. They got to become better at that. And I think, as time goes on, I keep saying this, but it hasn't happened yet. But I think this team will get better with some of these little caveats here and there. But I guess time will tell. Yeah, and when you look at that, we will see you next year. Next time we have you here on Deep in the Novo covering basketball. But we will have all this bowl game coverage for you, starting with our next episode 36, which is previews the Miami Cheez-It Bowl. This is going to be fun. I'm Ryan Novozinsky, joined here as always by Sudeep Tumma. Have a great day.